You should screw up. You should not have it all figured out. If you have it all figured out and you excel from day one, you're a deity. You're not a human.
Right.
That's not possible. The point is, you shouldn't have it all figured out. So I'm of the school that says, let me take those challenges. Let me take those defeats. Let me own those and remember and strategize and grow beyond those so that I'm a better version of myself on the backside. Because the goal is to always be a better version of ourselves. That future self that we see for ourselves, you know. And it's funny when you talk to different people what that looks like. You know, for me, it's completely different from others, and it's different for you, and it's different for Haas, different for HH. It's different, and that's cool because we're all individuals, and those are fun things to explore. But yeah, I've lived a hard life, dude. I've paid my dues. There's been a lot of blood and a lot of tears, and I'm 46. With that experience, what I want to do is I want people to listen, just listen, and then leapfrog a lot of the horse shit that I dealt with along the way. Move on. Let's go. You know, if you're listening and that's what you want to do, then you're listening to the right source, because I'm only going to ever give you the truth. I'm only going to ever give you my advice. I'm only going to ever give you what I've experienced firsthand. It's not some ethereal, you know, high-fiving on the stage kind of motivational speaker horse shit. That's not what I'm about. I don't need the money. It's not what I'm doing. I want to take people along the way, help them. I mean, from as rudimentary as providing clean water in a third world country to taking one of my close team members to running a Fortune 500 company. Like, I want that spectrum, that entire spectrum. I want a hand in every level of that. And that's what the 40-year plan is all about. There's a hell of a lot of fun on the backside and along the way, but it's really about who can I affect and bring up during the process of me going to where I'm going. I'm going there, with or without all of y'all. But I want as many people to come along for the ride as possible and be touched by that. And that is my legacy. That is where the rubber meets the road for me. I don't say that very often. I should probably say that more. Where you are in your early 30s, I remember that. I remember that angst of, I haven't done anything with my life. I got all these dreams and aspirations. I know I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, et cetera, but I haven't done shit. And so,
why are you explaining to me so closely?
Because this is what happens when you're in your young 30s. It happens to every man. I don't know if it happens to every female. I'm not a female, but I think there's something inside us that says by this date in our lives, we should have accomplished something magnificent or something worth looking back at and going, wow, look what I did.
Right.
And it's just not the case. I think it really takes many more years, sometimes in some people's case, 20 more years from your early 30s to really accomplish anything worth leaving behind.
Well, I think one of the biggest problems that I've had, and I think a lot of people have this, is they end up letting their failures become their identity. And you can't do that.
No, hell no. If I let my failures become my identity, I would be a worthless high school dropout. That would be my story, because that's a part of my story. The point of it is, you're right. Your failures do not define you. Your failures, they're like the muscles tearing inside that are becoming stronger. Yeah, you fucked up. Good. That's what you should do to grow. You should build that bicep by tearing that muscle down so it can rebuild and be stronger. You should screw up. You should not have it all figured out. If you have it all figured out and you excel from day one, you're a deity. You're not a human, because I'm only going to ever give you the truth. I'm only going to ever give you my advice. I'm only going to ever give you what I've experienced firsthand. It's not some ethereal, you know, high-fiving on the stage kind of motivational speaker horse shit. That's not what I'm about. I don't need the money. It's not what I'm doing. And that's what the 40-year plan is all about. There's a hell of a lot of fun on the backside and along the way, but it's really about who can I affect and bring up during the process of me going to where I'm going. But I want as many people to come along for the ride as possible and be touched by that. And that is my legacy. That is where the rubber meets the road for me. I don't say that very often. I should probably say that more. You're not always going to make a 100% judgment call on the quality of the information that you're getting from the individual that you've aligned yourself with. That needs to be a quote. To me, it's just one word, and I would think it's probably resilience, to not stay down. And so you just have to be resilient inside your being, inside your person, to get back up and do it all over again. Knowing that you just fucked up yesterday and it was bad. Today's a new day. This is a new hour. Tomorrow's a new tomorrow, et cetera, right? So that resilience to never quit, just never quit, to get up and do it again, even if the season is a 6-month season or a 2-year season. So you've got to be resilient to just stop, own it, and move forward. So I'd say resilience to the consequences and the outcomes of your actions is probably the one common thread through that whole thing for me. You know, people's true colors shine when things get tight or things get rough or things excel. Maybe somebody becomes uber successful and all of a sudden they're a dick. That happens. That's real world shit, right?
Well, I think that's where you lose the fact that you get super successful and you're not humble.
Right.
All of a sudden, you're not an ideal team player.
Yeah.
Who wants to follow someone that's like that all the time?
Right.
I mean, there's a little narcissism that comes into play, and no one's going to want to follow that.
That's right. And narcissism's a fine line.
Well, and I think that
confidence and arrogance, fine line. Narcissism and giving beyond without recourse.
Right.
How would somebody go about finding a mentor? I mean, is it basically you just write them a letter, write them an email, stalk them, basically do everything you can but get a restraining order until they say yes?
You could try that.
That's kind of what I had to do.
You can try that. So I think what I quoted last week was identify the person that is as close to a version of your future self as possible, and then engage that person. Now, some people's future version of themselves is The Rock, right? Or Richard Branson, or Elon Musk, or something like that. And so those guys aren't engaging them personally, eyeball to eyeball, is usually not an option. Most of the time, when you have people at that level of success, you can always find a book, find a program, watch their Twitter, their whatever, follow them along in those aspects. But what I was identifying last week when we spoke was, yes, if you have the opportunity and you're interested in finding a one-on-one, eyeball to eyeball mentor, then you look for the person that is the closest to a version of your future self, and you go to them, even if they're a stranger. Oftentimes they're not. Sometimes they are. You go to them and you say, hey, I'm at a phase in my life. I'm looking for mentors. I've identified you as someone who I look up to. You have accomplished some things, at least from an outsider looking in, and I'm interested to see if that's something that's ever crossed your mind, and what can I do to get my foot in the door, or is that something you're even interested in?
Right.
And,
Yeah. So what if you have multiple mentors, but they have different opinions on certain topics?
I think it's great.
You just bring that in.
I think different opinions. I think different opinions is where truth finally comes out.
Yeah.
Right? If somebody says do it this way, and somebody says do it this way, and somebody says do it this way, you have three different opinions. That's great, because then you have three different vantage points to look inside and say, well, which one do I want to be more like? And an opinion's not a wrong answer.
Right.
It's just the way that guy did it. We talk about some guys that want to work 8-hour days and go home and be with the family the rest of the evening and never work a weekend. We talk about guys who work 18-hour days and work every Saturday, and they only go to church on Sunday or something. I mean, there's not a wrong way. I think you have to find your center, and I think helping to find your center is tied up in finding multiple opinions and points of view and experiences. So I think it might make you more well-rounded to have three different individuals who have three different opinions. You just have to figure out your piece, how that works for you. And so I think it's actually probably more beneficial to have multiple points of view, opinions, however you want to define it, to get to that place to where you're finally defining who you are and what you stand for.
Yeah.
So I like that. That's a great question.
So what would you tell your 20-year-old self now if you were mentoring your 20-year-old self that maybe they didn't share with you or they didn't teach you? What's something that you learned on your own?
Ooh, that's a great question. What's something I learned on my own? I think the number one thing I learned on my own is that people have high expectations and demands and very little grace and gratitude. No mentor that I ever had said, look, everybody's an asshole. Your customers are going to hate you. There's going to be people you can't please. Just get over it and move on. Because I think it kind of wounded me in some aspects, little wounds along the way where you try and you try and you try and you just couldn't make that person happy, or you just couldn't get that person off center of wanting to crush you and take you out. And I think that was something I learned on my own, that I think deep down inside people are good and want to be good, but in those certain situations revolving around finances, revolving around money, there can be some really cold-hearted shit that goes down. And I just, as a young business guy, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting maybe I was just too lofty on myself, and I thought, hey, here I am, world, buy my shit, and it went badly. But that's probably the one thing I don't recall anyone ever telling me, look out, there's bumps in the road, people are like this.
Right.
So that's probably the only thing I can remember right offhand.
If you're going to get a mentor, you need to just go out there and ask.
Yeah.
What's the worst anybody's going to say to you?
Yeah, I've heard several people in the past say this, but I think most recently I heard Gary Vaynerchuk say, one of the biggest problems with people in general is that we answer no for the other party before we ask the question.
Absolutely.
So we just don't ever ask.
Right.
The word mentor has such a astute kind of feel to it, like, oh, I'm a mentor. I mean, it's just basically a confidant, a friend, someone you can say, hey, what would you do if, and that person gives you the information. Mm-hmm. It's not like this big expanse of an idea. I mean, so don't be so intimidated by the connotation of mentor, mentee, that informational exchange. Don't be afraid to ask. I would stop listening to this podcast right now and go to your phone if you have that person's number and pick up the phone and call them or shoot them a text and say, hey, you got a minute? I want to talk to you about something. And just do it, I think people need to have really hard conversations with themselves first, and then with their significant others. And then they got to get on the same team with that significant other, if there is one, and with their kids and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there are so many people in this world that are happy with a tenth of what we as Americans have. We're so rich and we're so overindulged in our society. We have these misconceptions and things about what it looks like. And I just really believe that everybody has to find their own peaceful place of wholeness and well-being and wealth and financial security and whatever that looks like. Some of that stuff, as you get a little older and as you grow, will lose its luster. I guarantee it. It will. Especially when you get older and you start thinking about the seconds and minutes and days that are ticking by. That becomes the wealth. I want to live forever. I don't want to die. I want to keep going. And I want everybody around me to be healthy. And when you have a loss, you're like, oh God, it's real. Death's real. It's coming. Yeah. And all that stuff's real. And so am I going to chase all this other shit for 20 years or 30 years and then die of the stress I had to put out there to go get it?
Right.
Or am I just going to live and embrace, that hand-holding glass of wine at the sunset on a county road outside my town? Because that moment is just as beautiful as the one on the yacht in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. They're both beautiful in their own right, but one is more heavily construed as successful and one is kind of diminished and they're just poor. No, they're whole.
Right.
Yeah, that's a tough place to be. We really segued on that, but that was good stuff. I felt that was something I needed to say.
Right.
So
I think I was forced a little bit to get out of my comfort zone, but now I'm out of my comfort zone. It feels even better.
But you were absolutely forced. So what we're dealing with here is a lot of people listening aren't forced. They're not being laid off, yet they're still stuck in that position you were a few weeks back,
comfortable.
A couple of months. Well, it's not really comfortable because there's no growth and it's kind of stale. It's just like this. I call it the imprisonment of normalcy.
Right.
But you're handcuffed, you're chained, you're tied to that. And you can't muster up enough out of your wanting to stay comfortable by, I don't have enough money to quit yet, so as soon as I do, I'll quit and I'll chase my dreams. And so they're trying to pad that experience instead of just taking it all right in the face and then being forced to move forward. Well, you mentioned that tweet about failure is the foundation of humility. For me, I believe that. Because of the failures in my life, the things that I've done wrong, the challenges that I've come up against and failed to accomplish or failed to follow through on and things like that, those experiences invoke humility because you experience it and you don't have a choice but to either wither up and die or go away or pull yourself up by the bootstraps, admit to yourself and to others that you screwed up, that you failed, which is a humble position to hold and to be in. And then you build on that. Foundation means you're building on it. So you made a screw up, you failed, you owned it, you were humble, you worked through it, and then you built on those experiences to never do that again, right?
Right.
So that's truly, for me, the foundation of everything. You just continually fail and get better and fail and get better and fail and get better. But with each failure comes another level of humility.
I've lived a hard life, dude. I've paid my dues. There's been a lot of blood and a lot of tears. And I'm 46. With that experience, what I want to do is I want people to listen, just listen, and then leapfrog a lot of the horse shit that I dealt with along the way. Move on. Let's go. If you're listening and that's what you want to do, then you're listening to the right source, because I'm only going to ever give you the truth. I'm only going to ever give you my advice. I'm only going to ever give you what I've experienced firsthand. It's not some ethereal, high-fiving on the stage kind of motivational speaker horse shit. That's not what I'm about. I don't need the money. It's not what I'm doing. I want to take people along the way, help them. I mean, from as rudimentary as providing clean water in a third world country to taking one of my close team members to running a Fortune 500 company. Like, I want that spectrum, that entire spectrum. I want a hand in every level of that. And that's what the 40-year plan is all about. There's a hell of a lot of fun on the backside and along the way, but it's really about who can I affect and bring up during the process of me going to where I'm going. I'm going there, with or without all of y'all. But I want as many people to come along for the ride as possible and be touched by that. Mm. And that is my legacy. That is where the rubber meets the road for me. I don't say that very often, but I should probably say that more.
And I don't want to leave any young person behind.
Yeah. you know?
I hope that guy runs into you 5 years from now and he's like, dude,
Dude, I ran into you.
you have
and
no
were
idea
like,
what I've done since we last talked.
It's so crazy. Like, I started
wanna-
listening to your podcast, and now I'm working at, such and such, and I'm fixing to open my own restaurant. Like,
Yes.
that's
I started my own ballet company.
exactly. That's the kind of stuff that I want. I don't want a piece of the action.
Yeah.
I want the story behind it.
Yep.
I want to be a part of that story because that stuff lives on. That's something that he would
More
tell
about-
his kids
Yeah,
about.
that's legacy. That's changing the family tree right there. Like
It
this
is. You know what street we're about to be on?
What's that? Legacy? Dang it!
Zoom into that, Hoss. We're about to be on Legacy.
Talking about legacy, and we are on legacy. That's perfect. You can't plan that.
I mean, I feel like I'm about to hear in the background,
the angels.
something like that.
I would do it, but I don't want to blow you away with my pipes.
I know. I've seen some of your posts.
seen it.
It's pretty good.
Just a segue, I launched a new newsletter through the website and been talking about it a little bit here and there, and it's called The Road Report because we're along for the ride,
Yeah.
and I'm taking everybody with me, and so notes from the road and all that kind of stuff. So if you're out there and you want to get a weekly newsletter from me with all the good stuff, some insider stuff like that, and then also just some stuff that you won't find really published anywhere else, it'd be cool if you jumped on board.
Sounds good. Very cool.